Hey guys, welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. I want to read a quote for you. The status quo won't change. It's time to vote the parties out. That quote is from my special guest. His name is Steve Cox, and he's running for Congress as an independent for California's 39th district. Hi, Steve.
Hi, how's it going?
Going great. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so before we get into your platform, can you tell everyone a little bit about your background and why you decided to run as an independent?
Yeah, well, I am an independent, so that's the number one reason why I decided to run specifically as an independent. It's because I've been one since like 2003, maybe late 2002. You know, I think a lot of us are born into political parties. Our parents are a particular party or whatever, and then you just kind of, because you're raised by your parents, at least one of them, you end up doing thinking the way they think and stuff for a while at least. And so I was about 25 years old, I guess, 24, 25, somewhere in there, when I realized that the Republican Party, which is the party I belonged to at the time, didn't do any of the things that they said they wanted to do. They always talked about small government, but they always had, the most drastic spending increases and stuff like that when a Republican was president. They only wanted a small government when a Democrat was president, but when a Republican's president, they go crazy. And then even when I was in high school as a Republican, because I bought into all the like small government, keep people out of your life, keep government out of your life stuff until, I was in my 20s. And even in high school, though, I didn't understand why Republicans were against gay marriage. I'm like, what's more government in your life than the government telling people who can or can't be married? Like that seems insane. So there was a lot of stuff that just, it kind of festered for a while. And then I left the party after the Patriot Act and attacking the wrong country and all this other stuff after 9/11. And then I've been an independent ever since. And I noticed in my own pattern of thinking that for a long time, I still had a bias for Republicans for a few years and against Democrats because it was just ingrained. And so it took like a concerted effort, a conscious effort to root out those sort of biases. And then I ended up with one for the Democrats and against the Republicans for a while, and so it's just kind of this back and forth. But I eventually landed at what I believe is the rational position, which is that both of those parties don't care. They only care about money and power for themselves, and anything that furthers that goal. So if doing something for us, the regular people, helped them get more money and power for themselves, they would do it. As long as there wasn't somebody paying them even more money than that not to do it, right? Such as universal health care, right? Medicare for all or something like that. So, and then the reason why I ended up running for Congress is after the 2016 election, when Trump won, I got to be honest, I was radicalized a lot farther left by Barack Obama, of all people. It wasn't by Republicans. I gave Barack Obama $500 in 2008 on the hopes of him fixing healthcare as he promised, and as the hopes of him getting us out of all the wars, which I wanted us to get out of, the hopes of increased whistleblower protections that he promised when he was running for office. And he did none of those things really. And, so by 2012, I didn't even vote for president. I was like, we have Romney Care guy, the white guy from Massachusetts who basically created the blueprint for Obamacare on the national level. And I'm like, so, I felt like I was choosing colors instead of people, like, because I couldn't really see what the real difference was between those two candidates. And I'm like, I don't really care what color they are. Like I want somebody who's doing the right stuff. So I ended up bailing on and didn't even vote for president in 2012. But after the 2016 election, I was like, okay, the people just elected this dummy like this. You're right. Because I just never thought he was very smart. And I'm like, okay, so, but there's obviously a desire for something different. And I was driving up to a race in Northern California because my job is as a photographer and journalist covering motocross racing and supercross racing. I was driving up to Northern California from Southern California. It's about a 5 or 6 hour drive, 5 hour drive how I drive. And I was just kind of deep in thought about this stuff, which driving is a great meditation time for me to like get into things like that. But I was just deep in thought about like why, basically right at that point, I had just turned 40 years old. This was May of 2017. I had just turned 40 years old in April, which I just turned 44 a few days ago, 6 days ago. So I turned 40 years old, and it's a bit of a milestone. And I'm sitting there going, okay, how old am I going to be when somebody comes along that I can really get behind as a candidate, that I can really say like, hey, I want, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He's got the right attitude, I think, for the job. Like, because one of the problems I see is that we keep electing people who are nice, right? People who want to get along with other people, which is, good for winning elections. It's good for winning elections because you want to get along with all the voters and you're good at schmoozing. But once you get into office, that means that you go to DC and you're going to get along. You're going to work to get along with the sewer over there, so you end up not actually fixing anything. You end up sort of joining the club, so like I think we elect the wrong type of people. So I'm sitting there going like, when are we going to get somebody I can really get behind as a candidate? Like, am I going to be 50? Am I going to be 60? If I'm 70 before that happens, and if it still doesn't happen, I'm going to feel really upset. I'm going to be really angry about all these years that went by and nobody took the time to, that I couldn't find anybody that I could get behind like that. And, I had these, the other half of this is that I sort of talked myself into it with that, but also with the idea that like, society in general, when we have a society, we belong to a society. I believe if you have answers, needed answers that are required to address the problems that we face, and nobody else is properly addressing those problems, and your answers are unique or whatever, but you believe they're correct, I think it's your job as a member of that society to try and institute those changes. Like that's your job. It's not really a choice. It's like, people are being hurt, people are being killed, people are losing their livelihoods. And, I feel like I have a good handle on why and what we can do to fix those things. So that was ultimately the end point. And I went to that race when I finally got there. I got there that night. It was a Friday night and the race was on Saturday. And I went around the pits at the race and told all the people there who all know me that I was running for Congress. And I did that because I knew that I'd chicken out. It's just so much work and it's so scary. And I knew that I would chicken out if I didn't sort of hang myself. So I told everybody who knew me that I was going to run for Congress. So I knew that if I didn't do it, I'd look like a total jerk. So that's ultimately how I ended up running for office and doing it as an independent. But I truly do believe doing it as an independent might get us the right way, like get us pointed in the right direction, because it's not just about me, it's about getting more independents in there, because the people that own both those parties, they don't lose those seats. The people who own them don't lose those seats when the party switches, right? When it just goes from Democrat to Republican or back. Blue Cross Blue Shield, Raytheon, all these companies, they're all fine. Like they do just fine. Thank you very much. Right. So we need to if we want to kick the oligarchy out of those seats, we got to kick both parties out of those seats, in my opinion.
Agreed. So I want to ask you a question about California. So a lot of people have been leaving California and moving to places like Texas or like Colorado, places more affordable. Some people have said, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, some people have said that it's the Democrats' fault that people are leaving California. You live in California. What's your take on that? Like, who is to blame for the reason why people are leaving?
So this is going to be a bit of a meta answer, but yeah, the Democrats are definitely at fault in Congress in our assembly, in our state Senate, and in the governor's house. Those people They run everything in this state. So to try and say that it's not their fault, I think is kind of crazy. But that's not to say that it's only their fault. I think it's primarily their fault, but I also think that the voters themselves, this is a tough part of my campaign, because a big part of what I want to run on, which is a little bit tough sometimes, is blaming the voters. Like, this mess we have, that's your fault. It's your fault. You're the ones that keep electing these people, right? And I understand that a lot of times you don't have another choice besides those two. A lot of races, people don't run as anything besides those two major parties. But and in that case, I guess you do what you got to do, right? But the fact that so many people do run as third party of some sort, whether it be independent, which I think is the answer, or some other party, and get so little traction, I think is directly that puts the blame directly on the shoulders of the voters themselves. The voters themselves have to bear the responsibility of our government's behavior. If we're not willing to take on ownership of our own government and how it operates, then this is never going to get fixed. None of this stuff's going to get fixed, because why would it? Who's going to be the one in there making it happen? So, I think that a big part of it is the voters in California, but I'm a pro-gun lefty, right? I'm a left-wing what I like to call, or not like to call, but on the political compass, I'm a left-wing independent, or left-wing libertarian is the word I was looking for. Mm-hmm. So, I'm for universal health care. I'm for, defunding the police as much as possible, and ultimately getting rid of as many police as we can. I think if you run a society that's truly fair and just, where the bottom isn't abject poverty and the top isn't $200 billion, I think you don't need that many police anymore. The police, you wouldn't need them, because the crime would drop. Because why? Like, criminals aren't bad people per se. They're in a bad situation for the most part. So I really think that there's a lot to be said about that stuff on the left. But so as part of that, where I'm going with that is that I went to the gun shop, because I'm a pro-gun guy. I went to a gun shop in December of 2019 and signed the recall against Gavin Newsom. That was before the pandemic started or anything, because they're like, you want to sign to recall Gavin Newsom? I'm like, yeah. I didn't even know it was a thing, but I'm like, yeah, I'll sign that. Like, screw that guy. So, and the thing is like, I would really like to fix the state of California as well. But there's a lot more, like, frankly, I don't really understand the California Constitution that well. I don't really understand some of the more local political things, like roads, like citywide stuff. There's things like that are a little weird to me that I've just never dived into. But I do understand the U.S. Constitution. I do understand American history. I do understand I understand macroeconomics pretty well, and a lot of stuff like that. And a couple of my big pushes are to fix the VA, because my dad is a veteran who's been screwed over by the VA repeatedly for over a decade, and get our soldiers all home, like bring everybody home, which I can't do that from a California state position anyway. Either of those things that are two of my primary pushes, So that's why I wouldn't actually run here. But the final point is on why people are leaving California is property values are insane here. They're completely nuts. Where I live, it's a nice property, but it's unincorporated. So it's like not officially part of a city. Like when I call, if I were to call 911, which I don't, because I want to live, But if I was, if I called 911, sheriffs would show up, even though I'm technically inside Chino, which is a city, or Chino Hills, which is a city. But sheriffs show up because it's unincorporated part of the town. And where I live, right across the street, I mean, it's a nice piece of property. It's like, fairly big, but I rent. But like nice, right across the street, the guy just sold his house for like $1.1 million. And I'm just like, that's insane. Like, it's insane that it's like a third of an acre, which is, okay, like you have a yard, but in like 2,500 square feet or something, and $1.1 million. I mean, wow. So that's a big part of it too, is I think that it's not just being mismanaged from the position of, like, I think a lot of people are leaving the state because they feel as if they're being put upon, sort of a small amount of oppression, if you will, because we pay all this money in taxes. It's like a 10% tax rate here, income tax rate for the state. And all the sales taxes are in my area are anywhere from 8 to 11%, depending on the county you buy something in. And you pay all these taxes, all these fees. We just had a daughter, my wife and I, Daphne, who's like my pride and joy. She's almost 16 months old. She'll be 16 months old tomorrow. And she, but like, we had to pay the county of Los Angeles, which is where she was born, in the hospital there. We had to pay $25 just for her birth certificate. And I'm like, why? Like, we're bringing a new person into your state. Like, this is a person who is going to eventually, if we stay in the state, pay taxes into your system, is going to have a job and help the economy, et cetera, in California. And I have to pay money. I have to pay money out of my pocket to get a birth certificate, right? Like, that's insane to me. It's just nuts. And car registration is insanely expensive here. Gas taxes are really crazy. And CARB, which is the California Air Resources Board, they do a thing with the gasoline here where they require a proprietary blend of gasoline that can only be sold in California. None of the oil companies or gas companies can sell it anywhere else because it's a requirement that only California has. And because of that, our gas prices are usually 30% higher than anywhere else they are in the country, sometimes even more, So, and we're forced to commute, because the other part is that if you work anywhere, you can't afford to live near there because all the businesses are in more expensive areas, like Los Angeles is a more expensive area. So if you want to have if you want to work at a company where you have like a chance of moving up somewhere or whatever, usually you have to commute an hour or so to work every day, back and forth, like an hour each way, and so you're paying all this money in gasoline just to go to work, and you're losing all this time that you could have with your family and everything else just to get to work and come home, and then on top of that, you have these crazy property values that make it impossible for first-time buyers to buy a home if they don't already have equity in something else, or they're not just rich, and on and on. I mean, there's just a stack of things that make it really desirable to get the hell out of here, and it's sad because I love California. I love where I live and where I've lived here my whole life in the same area. But, I do understand why people leave, I get it. And it's been a thought I've had more than once as well, because it's just, you eventually get tired of it. You eventually get tired of like, oh, another fee, another tax, another, and they outlaw all kinds of weird stuff. Like, but we wanted to make limoncello like shots for a party a few years ago, like these little Jello shots or whatever, and you need Everclear alcohol to make that, right?
Yep.
It's illegal in California. You can't buy Everclear here because it's too high of a alcohol percentage or whatever. So I had to literally drive to Las Vegas to a Bevmo, or Phoenix. It was Phoenix actually, to a Bevmo, like just outside of Phoenix, to buy like a few jugs of that. right because we like I was going near there anyway, but the point was, like, I was going to Blythe, which isn't that far away, but the point is like, this is, can you let us be adults and handle our own decisions at some point? Is that something that you could allow us to do, please? And that's where my left libertarian thing comes in, is that left libertarian and right libertarian differ in that right libertarians are really primarily concerned and really only concerned with negative liberties, which is preventing people from interfering in you doing what you want to do. So that's preventing government interference. Left libertarians like myself, we believe in both preventing negative liberty or, enforcing negative liberties, but also positive liberties, which is essentially truly enabling a person and empowering a person to really use those rights or freedoms that they should be able to use. So it's not just like, hey, we'll allow you to go wherever you want. You can travel wherever you want, right? And that'd be like a right-wing libertarian thing. A left-wing libertarian thing is like, you can travel wherever you want, and we're going to provide you with roads and trains and other means of actually doing it, right? Actually achieving that freedom. So, that's the big difference. And so, some people have accused me of being progressive. I'm not sure that word has a meaning anymore.
Nope.
But I've never really owned that. So to me, I'm a left libertarian. And as that, I can talk to Republicans and they understand what I'm saying most of the time about most things outside of like abortion. I could talk to right-wing libertarians too, and we'll disagree on some stuff, but they'll understand I'm mostly on their side, as far as the stuff they already believe. And I can talk to most Democrats too, although they're the hardest, to be honest. So yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed on your platform there was a plan for veterans, and my dad's a veteran, so that one really like piqued my interest.
Yeah.
You said that veteran income taxes should be paid in full forever.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I'll give you the backstory to that. My dad served in Vietnam. He was a crew chief on CH-53 helicopters in the Marine Corps, which was cargo and personnel. So like he flew a lot of medevac missions, like pulling soldiers out of the middle of a bunch of really bad stuff. He got shot down a bunch of times over there and whatever. And when he came home, he was outside of the thing that sent him home, which was he was working on the tail rotor of his helicopter, and the bolt broke and he fell off the tail rotor and busted his knee up real bad. And so that's how he actually got sent home, which is kind of a bit of a lack of it's like an unheroic way of being sent home from war, but it was, it's just what it was. But and then the Agent Orange exposure, which has caused him cancers that he's been fighting for over a decade now. That's another thing he brought home, but we didn't know about that till 2008 or so, but 2007. But he came home with PTSD. He came home with a huge emotional problems, that like, caused him to snap on certain things, like anger, and really difficult for a child like I was to understand what was going on, because you felt like you had to walk on eggshells a lot of the time. But I talked to my mom about it too as an adult, and she tells me all these stories about him waking up in the middle, like her waking up in the middle of the night with him hitting her, but he's asleep, but he's like punching her and stuff because he's having one of these horrible nightmares. And the thing is when somebody goes to actual battle, that's my point about when I'm talking about on my website, is when somebody actually goes into battle for this country, whether you agree with the reasons for the battle or the fight at all, which I don't, for any of the ones we're currently in, plus the one my dad was in, whether you agree or not, you're doing that for that government, for the US government, and you're sacrificing something regardless of whether or not you're physically affected when you leave. I think you're giving up a lot. And I believe that under those circumstances, those men and women should be paid back. And I think that doing something that hellish and going through warfare like that, I think should exempt people. My proposal is to exempt people, war veterans, battle veterans, from income taxes on the first $100,000, federal income taxes on the first $100,000 a year that they make. So like if Jeff Bezos of Amazon was a veteran, like he'd still pay a lot of taxes, but it'd be after the first 100,000. So, because I think that's a more than reasonable amount of money, per year that people might make, so that's my proposal. And I think honestly, that's one among my proposals. I think that's one I could actually get passed. I think I could, there could be enough of a positive push to that, and too little of a downside to it to cause much backlash. I think I could actually get that one passed just because, and if I could do that, that would be, amazing, I think. And the best part about it, and not the best part is helping veterans, but the second best part about that is that by excluding war veterans from income taxes, you would be applying an additional disincentive for the federal government to declare war in the first place, to send anybody into battle, right?
Nope.
Because they'd be losing future revenue. So I also like that. I like the subversive nature of that sort of thing.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, the VA is a mess. Like my dad had to deal with them as well. So I know you want to get money out of politics.
Yeah.
I'm 100% behind that. There's a quote on your website I want to mention because I think this is very important for people to hear. It says that poor people don't have political power, even though there are so many more of them. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a study that was it Princeton? I'm pretty sure Princeton was at least involved in this study, but it was a study about they looked at like about approximately 1,800 different political issues from about 1982 or something until 2001. And during that period of time, they tracked like the likelihood, like the public opinion of it, the oligarchy, if you will, opinion of it, like the wealthy people and big business opinions of that particular policy. And they tracked that stuff. And then they tracked like whether it passed or didn't. And they found a direct correlation where the higher the percentage of the rich or big businesses or whatever, the oligarchy end of it, the higher the percentage of them supported a particular measure, the more likely it was to be passed by Congress. Like it was a perfect curve, like a perfect graph curve. It's like where you're like, oh, wow, okay, But when it came to, it showed, I mean, this is scientific. It showed that as far as the regular person, the you and me type of person, the likelihood of anything they supported did not change regardless of how many regular people supported it. It was a flat line. The graph was 19 to 20% all the way across it. Like it was a flat line. So there was they literally don't do anything for us. Anything that we get from our own government is a byproduct or somehow of an accident most of the time, or it's something that they have to throw in. They know they have to throw in order to get the thing passed, or to not lose their seat, right? So like the coronavirus aid packages are great examples of this, because all this money went to these big businesses and all this other stuff, and then we got, in the first one, $1,200. And it's just like, oh, okay, like somehow you guys spent $3 trillion and we only got a tenth of it. The regular people got like a tenth of it. Like that's nuts. So, that sort of thing is always the case. Like it, and it's partially in fault, or the fault of the way that the House specifically, but both houses of Congress, how they allow people to add things to bills, different bills onto the same bill for the same vote, stuff like that, which is, I don't think it should be a thing. But it's still ultimately, it's because they serve big business. They want to make sure that the people who are paying for their conventions, paying for their, CAP or whatever the Centers for American Progress, that was the thing, but it's Neera Tanden's old organization, paying all those bills, all these sorts of things. They want to make sure that those checks keep coming in. I mean, in 2016, the Republican National Convention in 2016 and the Democratic National Convention in 2016 both got over $1 million from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Both, because Blue Cross Blue Shield, that $2 million isn't even nothing, right? It was like 2.5 million total. They don't care, like they're making billions, but the investment, that $2 million guarantees that they're always going to be able to keep making these billions. Like that's the idea. That's the whole point. And until we fix that, it's not going to get any better. Not significantly so. We'll get little margins here and there, but I really don't believe anything major is going to change. And I believe we truly need major change, like a real big change, not just some, incremental BS like they're always trying to give us. The Democratic Party specifically has a pattern of passing laws that are really at best ineffective, but at worst make things worse, and then using like a PR team to sell it like it's like they've done something for us. I mean, that's what they did with the 1994 assault weapons ban. At the time, the guns accounted for like 1.5% of all gun crimes, right? The guns that they banned. And then they put so they're out there going, look, we're doing something about all the gun crime, everybody. But they weren't, they were doing nothing. And then, they also put a 10-year sunset provision in it so that it would expire in 10 years, because they wanted to be able to run on having to revote or whatever, pass that again. Right. So that's all it was. If they really truly thought that those particular weapons were the reason why we had such huge gun crime numbers and gun homicides and everything else, it's irresponsible to put a sunset provision on the bill that you could finally get passed that's going to reintroduce those weapons into society. But they did that because they wanted to use it as a political thing to get back into office. I mean, that's how it works. And they did the same thing with Obamacare, with the Affordable Care Act. They passed that and then went out and told everybody, look at all this stuff we're doing for you. And I'm not, and this is a guy who just gave Barack Obama $500 during the previous election cycle and was still a big supporter of his at that point. And I'm like, that's not going to work. I was telling all my liberal friends, I'm like, this isn't going to work. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, because what they're saying is that now they're requiring everybody to have a thing. Right. Well, I said, televisions are a good market, a good free market where like the prices are always going down and quality is going up. But imagine what would happen to the prices and the quality if the government passed a law that everybody had to buy one television a year. Right. Yep. If you had to buy a television every year, if you did that, the prices would go up and the quality would go down, because you're taking the ability to say no out. Right. No to all the above, you take that away and it drives prices up. So I'm like telling them I'm like, that's basic economics. That's like very basic stuff, and I'm like, and then on top of that, the 80-20 rule that they put into that, which is that every insurance company is by law has to spend at least 80% of their premiums that they bring in have to be spent on patient care. Right. They did that. And then the other 20% goes toward, whatever they give to shareholders, profits, their administrative costs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out either, because there were no cost controls in the Affordable Care Act. So in the end, like, for example, in 2013, I broke my left femur, and the price to get my surgery, just the surgery for the femur rod put in my left femur, was $64,000. Right? $64,000. The total bill was double that. But it was $64,000. I was there for one night. And I talked to a friend of mine who's got a wife. He's British, but he lives in Spain, and his wife is a nurse in Spain. And I asked him to tell me what it would cost to pay cash for the same surgery there. $5,400. And I'm like, okay, and so what happens now is the insurance companies, like, they have no incentive on bringing the actual costs down, because the higher the costs are, the more that 80%, the bigger that 80% gets, that they have to spend on patient care, which means the bigger the 20% gets that they get to keep, that they get to put toward their administrative costs and keep for their shareholders and their CEOs and all this other stuff. I mean, the bill was written by lobbyists, so of course that's how it works. But anyway, it's a long answer, but I really do believe that's the real trouble of it. And I don't think you fix that by electing different Democrats or even different Republicans. I think it's the same, because the party itself is corrupt,
Right. Exactly. So I know you want to end the war on drugs.
Yes,
I 100% agree. I think it's long overdue. This has gone on for too long, and it's affected a lot of people's lives and their families as well.
And not to cut you off, but mostly people of color like you, Black people and Hispanic people for the most part. So,
yep,
not white people.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. There's a lot of pushback on that because we've been sort of indoctrinated into this, drugs are bad and we have to protect everybody for themselves. And they always bring up the children. What about the children? What about the children? It's like, that should be the parents' job, number one. Like, as a dad myself, if my kid was on drugs, I hope that I would know, right? I hope that I would be close enough to my child. I can't guarantee that because my child's 16 months old, but I really hope that I would know that. But on top of that, there's obvious bullshit, if you don't mind the expression, in the war on drugs. Because, for example, cannabis is Schedule 1, according to the DEA, which puts it on a level above, for example, cocaine, right? And it's like, well, and to be Schedule 1, according to their own definitions, the drug can't have any medicinal benefit and must be highly addictive. It's both of those things. It has to be both those things to be Schedule 1. And cannabis has neither of those things. It is medicinal for certain people and conditions, and it is not addictive. So how is it a Schedule 1? The reason why it's Schedule 1, I'm convinced, and Joseph Kennedy, the former representative of Massachusetts, who's a part of the Kennedy clan, he slipped up and said this in an interview once, because he used to be a DA, which is a cop. But he slipped up in an interview once, and he said the reason why he's against legalization of marijuana in Massachusetts is because police officers are able to use the smell as an excuse to search people's cars and or things. And he's like, and you get all kinds of illegal guns, all kinds of other stuff. And I'm like, whoa. You just admitted to wanting a certain plant to be illegal so that you can use it to violate constitutional rights of people that are pulled over by the police, right? That's what you just admitted to. And he was, by the way, he was in the Congressional Progressive Caucus, but he was there. And I'm like, how is this a thing, right? But I think that's a big part of it. I think that the smell itself, because it makes it easy for cops to even fake that they smell it, like, oh, I think I smell weed, when they don't, but they can say that they think they do. And then they can search your stuff and make it. And then that's part of what happens with Black people and Hispanic people who get pulled over, is the cops will look at them and be like, yeah, this is about the type that I think I could maybe get something on. And so they'll start harassing them, have them get out of the car to search it, do all this other stuff. And, I put myself in the shoes as best as I can of Black people as often as I can in those circumstances. And, I understand why they run from the cops, to be honest. Like, they grow up a lot of these people grow up in inner city communities where police are always around and always brutalizing their own family and friends, people they know, their neighbors, their dad, their uncle, their brother, their son, and then they grow up, the kids grow up under those circumstances, watching these cops beating all their, whatever, doing all this really awful shit. And it's like, then they get pulled over and they run. And a lot of white people look like me are like, well, why would you run if you got nothing to hide? And I'm like, no. That's not how that works. Like, imagine there was a known gang, a street gang that dressed this certain way and was, targeting you, right? People who look like you. And then one of those had you pulled off the side of the road and trapped right there or whatever, like you're gonna run, from them. You're gonna want to, at least, so I totally do understand. I understand all that stuff too. But like the war on drugs is a failure. It's been a failure from the very start. There's never been a point when any of the drugs that are banned have been hard to get. Like you can get all of them. So, number one, you fail because it doesn't do anything. Number two, it also creates this massive influx of prisoners and everything else, most of whom are non-violent drug offenders who are basically just addicts or something like that. Or just got caught with a illegal flower in their pocket or whatever. And they end up in prison. We have 1% of our population in prison or on parole or whatever, but under control of the corrections system in our country. And it's not only the highest in the world by percentage of population, but also by outright number. So we have a country of 330 million people. China has like 2 billion or something. I don't know, a billion. It's over a billion. India has 1 billion plus, and neither of them have the number of people in prison that we have.
Nope.
So how can people sit around and be like the land of the free when we have the highest prison population of any country in the world? Like we've jailed more of our own people than any country in the entire planet. And we have the balls to sit around and talk about the land of the free and the home of the brave. Like, it's nonsense. And people need to get over this stuff, because this is all indoctrination stuff. It's all BS that we need to learn to give a side eye to, but the bigger point here is this, and I tell this, and I get a lot of Republicans on my side on the war on drugs. A lot of Republicans are very anti-immigrant, especially Hispanic immigrants, but Chinese immigrants, whatever, they don't like them. I don't mind. I love immigrants. I'm good with it. I love tacos. I love Chinese food. I got no problems with anybody. I want my country. I want different cultures around me. I like it. I think it's a good thing. So I'm not going to say this as somebody who agrees with their position about immigrants or anything like that. But in playing sort of devil's advocate with Republicans and stuff like that, when I'm walking around talking to people in the public, I frequently point out to them that the reason why we have such a problem at the southern border is because of our war on drugs, primarily because of our war on drugs, because cartels whose market is here, 99% of their sales market for their drugs, or their illicit drugs, is here in the United States. Those cartels run the governments in Mexico, almost completely in Mexico, but Guadalajara, Honduras, and on down into South America, Central South America. Those cartels run shit. And when you're a family, put it this way, and this, I've told this to people, but I wholeheartedly mean it. I have a daughter, and I would literally do anything for her safety, and for her to be able to grow up. If you think I wouldn't cross some imaginary line into a different country where the laws are different or whatever, even if it was against the law, if you think I wouldn't do that to protect my daughter, you're high. I would do that in a second. I wouldn't have to think twice about breaking a law like that. So, this idea that illegal immigrants are somehow, bad because they're already breaking the law just coming here. It's get over yourself, man. These people are leaving some pretty awful situations. And for the most part, at least very large part, we are the cause of that. Our country causes a lot of the strife that causes the people to show up at our border. So, if we got the hell out of all their business, and, that would help a lot. But additionally, if we ended the war on drugs and legalized eventually, this is the long one, the hard one to get, is to legalize all those drugs so that they can be regulated and taxed, and the tax money can be used to help addicts and things like that to recover instead of sending them to prison. And then the plants, specifically cannabis and mushrooms, those are, as far as I know, are the only two that are, or maybe there might be another cactus one that's a hallucinogen, peyote. So there's three that are just plants. And as far as I'm concerned, those should just be decriminalized. And the reason why I say that is decriminalization means no criminal penalty whatsoever. If it's truly decriminalized, there's no criminal penalty toward growing or harvesting or carrying or having anything. It's just what it is. I think that the plants, that's how they should be treated. But because they're not really dangerous, that's the big point of it, is they're not dangerous substances. Whereas cocaine, you can die if you take too much. Heroin, same. Methamphetamine, same. Like the harder drugs, those sorts of things that aren't just a plant but are actually highly processed drugs, those things, I think it wouldn't be safe just to decriminalize them. I think we would have to legalize and regulate those. But I think that's the right answer. And doing these sorts of things, not for nothing, brings us closer to the actual ideal of land of the free and home of the brave, as we always like to sing about, all proudly with our hand over our chest and whatever. So that I really do believe that that's the right answer. And some of the biggest groups pushing back against ending the war on drugs as a policy are prison security, like prison guard unions and private prison companies, and police agencies and stuff. Like they're all the bad actors that profit off of keeping it the way it is, the status quo.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Joseph Kennedy. When he ran against Ed Markey, I was just like, what are you doing? Like, I can't stand him. I live in Massachusetts. Like, I can't. He's such a Kennedy.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I'm just like, what are you doing? Like, go sit down. Like, you have no reason to run for this.
Howdy doody. Like, go sit your redheaded ass down. He totally looks like that Howdy Doody puppet from the 50s or 60s or whatever. That's all I can think of every time I see him is Howdy Doody. Just as all with his big red hair and shit. I know. And I was born with red hair, so I could talk shit.
I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
So in Massachusetts in 2020 election, ranked choice voting actually made it to the ballot, and I was really excited about it. Unfortunately, it did not pass, and I was super bummed. I was very surprised. I think a lot of people just didn't really understand the question for whatever reason. Those of us that are not as into or people not as into politics and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a common tactic actually to phrase it in a way that's confusing so that,
Yeah. So I wanted to get your opinion about that. Like, what's your opinion about ranked choice voting?
I mean, I think that there are good ways to do it. And I can't name the actual specific type, but there is one particular way that I think would work really well. There are also ways to do it poorly. For example, just to give you a mathematical example, just off the top of my head, if there are 10 candidates running for a particular thing, and one person is ranked 5th on every ballot, just as a mathematical whatever, and somebody else is ranked 1st on 40% of the ballots, but 10th on 60% of the ballots, the person who got 5th on all the ballots should win, right? Like they have a higher ranking or whatever overall. But the way that some of the ranked choice voting things are done is it's a top 3 thing. So you only pick the top 3, and then no value is assessed or given to the rest of the people on the ballot. And so it's kind of a confusing thing. And under those circumstances, one of the other problems is it requires computers to really sort of analyze it and make sure that everything is, how it should have ended up, probabilities and things like that. It's a pretty complex math from what I understand, which I don't understand the math, but from what I understand from the people who understand the math. So I think that there's good ways and bad ways. In California, just a couple of years ago, Gavin Newsom, our state legislature passed ranked choice voting, and Gavin Newsom vetoed it.
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, they don't want that, right? Like the status quo doesn't want something like that. But I think that the idea is sound. I think the idea is good, because what you're trying to do is defeat the duopoly and how they look at, wasted votes and this sort of, which I always get in these arguments with people, like, You waste your vote every single time you vote for somebody who doesn't do what they said they were going to do. Like
Yep.
100% of the time, that's a wasted vote. So how can you like fault somebody else and say that they wasted their vote just because they voted for their actual conscience, and somebody that they actually wanted? Like it's just really what they're saying is my opinions and my values are more important than yours, and I expect that you should adopt my opinions and my values and do as I want you to. That's what they're really saying. It's a very disrespectful way of talking to people about that stuff. But I think it's a good idea, and it could help a lot, but it does depend on how it's put together. And I think the system and man, I wish I could have looked this up before, but the one that the ranked choice voting thing that I had looked at that looked like it was good was it would have a sort of a bigger ballot as a precursor, and then like a runoff for like, people at the end. And I think that could have worked pretty well, as a two-step process. But I'm not sure that, again, like we could probably do it as a ballot initiative here, but it's going to take years to actually get that together. But the fact is like we actually had it passed. Like it was actually could have just gone into law with a signature, and Gavin Newsom vetoed it.
Wow, man.
And no real explanation. He just said, I just don't think this is right for California. It's like, no, that's not, you don't think it's right for you. You don't think it's right for you and your buddies and all your Bay Area, jerks that like control the party in the state. But like, I have a lot of friends that are in the Democratic Party in the state of California that are trying to change it from the inside. And I always sort of mock them for it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, why don't you change them? Why don't you join the mafia so you can change it from the inside? and they don't necessarily appreciate me mocking them for it, but but they still tell me these stories, and it's just as corrupt at the state level in California as it is anywhere else. That it's a problem, and that's what happens when you allow power to sort of get concentrated and into these for lack of a better term, clubs, like just a club that has all this power, and like it doesn't work. If you want actual freedom, like I was just talking about, you have to be willing to step up as a voter and as a political activist, and actually support, outright support the people that are standing up against both of those parties. I really believe it. But ranked choice voting, if you guys do it again, I hope it passes, but like another thing that happened here in California about the phrasing of stuff on ballots. There was one that was, what was it about? It was about, it was two elections ago in 2018, but basically the standard for it was, the way the question was written out, or the way the thing was written out, it seemed like for a lot of people, because it was like for or against a thing, but it was sort of a double negative. And so it was actually voting no was for it, and voting yes was against it, and yes won. But like in the post-election polls, a lot of the voters that were polled voted yes, but supported the no position, but they didn't know. They had no idea. So like that stuff happens all the time. The status quo, they get in there and they're like, at our time here at that time, the Secretary of State was Javier Becerra, who was just nominated into something by Biden, which, good riddance out of our state. It's just too bad he's now he's in everybody's state. But, I guarantee you, he wrote, he played a hand in making sure that ballot initiative was written in a weird way, so that, it would be confusing. But, that's another strategy that you have to be able to fight. But ultimately, if I can leave on one, I mean, I could answer as many questions you want, but the one thing that I really like people to take on again is that all of this stuff is your fault. I know it's an awful thing to say, and I know that it may not earn me a lot of support from people, but I have to, like, what I want, speaking for myself, is I want a government that truly works for us, that actually has our best interests in heart and does what's best for us as people, as regular people, the bottom 90% of this country. That's what I want. And, you know, I don't think you can get there without trusting the people to do the right thing, to actually vote out the shitheads and whatever. But like, it has to be put in the people's hands, and the people have to actually make that change. Like it can't be a top down type of thing. So that's why ultimately I blame the voters. Because it's got to be them who changes it. It's got to be the voters who decide that they've had enough and they want to change things. And until that happens, none of the other changes I think really matter. But that's also part of my gun policy. Like, again, trusting people. If you're going to trust people to vote, if you're going to trust people with a vote where they can actually, at least in theory, steer the direction of our governments from local and state and national governments using their votes, like that's a big responsibility you're giving to people. Well, it doesn't really make a lot of logical sense to me to give people that responsibility, but you can't have a gun, but you can't use these certain drugs. You can't, it's like, what, do you trust the people or not? Do you think the people are complete idiots, or do you think they're okay? Like, are they going to survive? To me, it really does make a difference. And so that's kind of the whole thing on my candidacy, is trusting the people, like about putting the power back into their hands. It's not about me having power. It's about making sure that the people I represent have it.
Awesome. All right, Steve, how can people get involved in your campaign?
Well, you can email me. It'll come to me at info@voteforcox.com, or you could go to voteforcox.com, which I'm going to be rebuilding here shortly. But there you'll find over 30,000 words of policy and philosophy, all sourced for data and everything else. So I try not to leave any stone unturned, because another part of trusting the people is telling them everything and letting them decide. Yep. It's not hiding what you believe about certain things. It's not hiding your personality either. Like, I get people mad at me all the time on Twitter and whatnot, but I sort of revel in it, because I'm like, yeah, be mad. It's okay. It's okay to be mad at me. And I'm not going to apologize unless I really feel like I did something wrong, but I welcome hatred because I think that's part of it. This is the thing. Like, I'm not going to kiss people's butt and whatever, but again, as I said in the very beginning, I think that somebody like me with that sort of attitude is the right person to send to DC. If you really want to, ruffle some feathers and get some stuff changing over there, you want to send people that don't care if everybody hates them. And I don't care if everybody hates me. I don't care, especially them. It's like, put me in a room full of awful people and try and make me feel bad that they don't like me. It's like, I don't care. I'm happy. I'm happy they don't like me when that comes around, so voteforcox.com has all the policy stuff. My Twitter is real Steve Cox, as well as my Facebook page and my Instagram page. I'll probably be starting up a Twitch or something like that soon, because I always have all these long drawn out things to say, and Twitter's like 280 characters and I can't get it out. So I'll be doing a couple other things like that too. But ultimately on my website, the big things are, if you want to volunteer, like if you have graphic design abilities or if you have fundraising abilities, or connections, things like that, I do need your help. If you want to just help with minor stuff, whatever it is, especially if you're local, that's also very helpful. And then ultimately the big thing right now is that I had a deal with an organization called Grassroots Analytics. I signed a contract with them, and they're this grassroots organization that gets all this donor data from left-wing sort of causes, candidates, et cetera. And then they supply that to candidates who want to be able to call people and email people to raise money for their campaigns. And they had signed a contract. Well, to start at the beginning, for my 2020 run, a person who was on my campaign contacted them about helping us. And they said that they only supported Democrats. So that was a bummer. But after everything that happened in the last election cycle, I contacted them directly and said, look, I'm not a Democrat, but I'm left of every Democrat in office. So if you really could use your help. And then they're like, oh yeah, for sure. And they full on signed a contract that got signed and sent back to me and all this other stuff. And then during the period of time between, it was like 4 or 5 days between signing the contracts and then when I was going to have my onboard, what they called onboarding onto their systems where I could get access to the voter data or the donor data. I pissed off one of the kids on, and they really are kids, but there's these, you know, the typical liberal / progressive, offended at everything, you know, type of person, the people that the right calls snowflakes. You know, that's what these people, a lot of the staff at this place are. And I was at the time given a bunch of shit to the 2 new senators from Georgia and Biden about them promising $2,000 checks and only talking about sending us a $1,400 one, as if the $600 Trump checks should count toward the $2,000 that they promised. You know, I was giving them shit about that, which I think they deserve. And I was just getting like, you know, mountains of like these sock puppet accounts and bots and stuff just coming down on me and, you know, telling me I'm a piece of shit and everything. And so I was just mocking them and like making fun of them and blocking them. And apparently one of them was probably one of the people at Grassroots Analytics. but they ended up canceling my contract is the point. Like literally 45 minutes before my onboarding call, I got an email saying that they're canceling the phone call and that I get a follow-up email, and then they canceled my contract. And what they said was I was unprofessional. My Twitter account was unprofessional. And I'm like, that's such a bullshit thing, because like the idea of professionalism by itself is already this elitist sort of thing. Like, I don't think most people really care about if a politician says a curse word every now and then or whatever. Right. Like, I don't think that's a real thing. And again, I believe that the actual answer is to send people who want to fight those people in DC, you know, like legitimately want to fight them. And so, you know, you can't do that with somebody who's not a fighter and who's not always trying to fight people about stupid stuff like this. You know, so it was just one of these things. And so in the end, I lost that fundraising opportunity, and that it really is a bummer, because I definitely would have easily capped off. Nina Turner uses them as her primary fundraising thing. And she raised like $1 million her first month, you know, wow. And all I need to raise like 150 grand. I don't even need that much to make it through the primary here. I'm convinced that's all I need. So, you know, long story short, I do need money. So if people have extra money, like I know times are tough for most people, they're tough for me too. But if you guys have extra money and you want to be a part of something, I need donations to that, because I need to reach a goal of $10,000. When I get to $10,000, there are services I can pay. I can buy this donor information from services and then raise more money using that information. But the way that Grassroots Analytics was going to do it, the way they do it, is they only charge a 3% commission off of all the money you raise. So like you don't have to pay till after you get the money from the people, you know. So this puts the onus right back into like basically only rich people can run for office, because you know, whatever. And I mean, it was a bullshit cop out that they gave me, and I don't really accept it, but it's not like I could sue them or anything. Like, we had a contract and the contract had no provisions in it for canceling it or anything like that. But like, what am I going to do? Am I going to sue them and then like go years and like miss the election anyway? Like, there's no point in it, right? They're just assholes. So, you know, the bottom line is I need to raise money, and I hate doing it, but I have to, because I can't keep spinning my wheels doing this for no money. And in 2020, I got 4.8% of the vote and spent only about $500 on actual promotion and stuff. The rest of my money was spent on government fees and stuff for ballot access. And so that was about 6 cents per vote, as it turned out. That $500 got me less than 1,000 votes fewer. So within 1,000 votes of the number of votes Chink Uger got, a couple districts over, having spent $500,000. He spent 1,000 times more money than me, and he got 1,000 more votes, less than 1,000 more votes than I did. And it also, by the way, in the previous election, there were more independents and third-party candidates in 2018 in the same election. If you add up my total and all the other third-party candidates in that race, it still came to less than half of what I got as the only third party candidate in this race in 2020. So like, I think that the impetus is there. I need the money, because the money is how I'm going to be able to reach enough people to tell them about the message and to get the message out there. If I can reach enough people, I can get in the top 2. And in California, it's a jungle primary. So no matter what parties they are, the top 2 vote getters in the primary go on to the general. And I can get in the top 2 with $150,000. Anything more than that, I can basically guarantee it, because I already have it all planned out. I've been through it before. So, money is my point. I need money. I hate asking for money, but man, I need money. I really, really need money. And I know this is the worst time because of COVID and like all the unemployment and all this other stuff, but man, we have to do something. We have to do something. And there aren't many people like me doing this as an independent around the country. I haven't looked that far. Like, I haven't looked state by state, but at least in terms of congressional runs in 2020, I got by far the highest percentage of any independent running anywhere, So I think that there's something here. And this is my last time doing this, because now that I have a daughter, if I lose, I'm not going to keep doing it. Like, I have to figure out what I'm going to do for her and take care of her, So, and that might be leaving California. So go roundabout back to the beginning of it. I really appreciate you having me on, but that's really the big thing is word of mouth, tell your friends. But if, the thing I tell people is, even if you don't have any money, if you're very, very close to destitution every month, like, a lot of us are, like I am, $5 a month. Can you spare $5 a month? Because you can set up a recurring donation too. And if I get, a few thousand people giving me $5 a month, I'm good. Like, we can get in there, like we can make it happen. So it's not just about a bunch of money right now, but if people can commit to just a few bucks, $3, $5, don't care. $1, I don't care. $1, I'll do that. Like, but if I could get enough people doing that, then we're good. Like, we'll be able to fund this campaign properly and actually take it to both these parties in this district. So I really appreciate you having me on for this.
Awesome. Everyone, please be sure to donate to Steve's campaign. I'll put the link for his website in the description below. Steve, thanks so much for coming on today. This was cool. This is fun.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. Anytime you want me back, just let me know.